Hi, it's Penny here, and today we're going to be working out what the best book I read in the year of 2023 was. So every month I do my wrap-ups book battle style, where I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. So kind of like a book bracket type thing. So what we're going to do in this video is basically battle each of those top books against each other until we come up with the best book of the year. So I'm going to start by doing it quarter by quarter, then we'll do the first half and the second half, and then the hardest battle, I expect. But we'll see. I do know the books that we have for this year, you'll see a certain series come up quite a lot. Actually, there's two series that managed to show up twice. But anyway, let's start with Q1. So we're going to have Magic Tides by Ilona Andrews up against The Blade Itself by Jo Abercrombie, up against Before They Are Hanged by Jo Abercrombie. So this is starting to give you a clue of what series you're going to see and hear a lot. Firstly, Magic Tides is part of the Kate Daniels series, which is one of my most favorite series. I have most of the books here. And then in the last year, Ilona Andrews, which is a husband and wife writing duo, they released these little short novellas kind of set after the main series. And I think actually also set like after some of the spin-off series that we're still waiting for more books in. So basically, Kate Daniels is a mercenary in this world where magic has started to come back in the world, but it's come back in waves. So sometimes magic will work and other times technology will work, but you kind of never know which one you're going to get. And the world is pretty post-apocalyptic as a result. So in Magic Tides, this young boy has gone missing and Kate just goes off to solve it. I love these books, but I just really enjoyed being back with Kate for these stories. The way that the magic is incorporated into the plot is so smart, and I'm just really loving like the maturity of Kate now that she's like more like my age or almost my age, and she's a mother and she's just trying to settle down and retire to some degree, but it never works out because you can't really help like wanting to help people. Anyway, this would not be a great place to start with the Kate Daniels series, and it is a little bit unfortunate because I know some of the earlier books, they have the whole shapeshifter alpha male trope and they can be a little bit cringe, but I really love where the series goes and how it incorporates like all sorts of different mythology into the world. Anyway, I love this. Obviously that will be true for every book that I talk about in this video. Then in February, the best book was The Blade Itself by Jo Abercrombie. So this is the first book in the First Law trilogy. We're following a bunch of different characters that kind of come together from different parts of this world where different empires are at war, and maybe there's also a little bit of a magical battle going on. And all our characters are very morally grey or even just straight out immoral, not great people. And in this book series, like, it never follows the typical hero's journey. Our characters start out terrible, it seems like they might learn some lessons, and then usually they kind of end up still doing some terrible things. Or everything they've done just doesn't matter to the eventual outcome. But I just love the character building in these books. Like almost every character is one that I either loved right from the start or grew to love. And the world also feels very real, along with Jo Abercrombie's very humorous writing style. I feel like I didn't mention that the Kate Daniels books can be quite humorous as well at times, especially these little novellas. But anyway, Jo Abercrombie always writes like quite humorously, even when he's describing some really dark and horrific things. And then he's also really good at like including these lines that just kind of get to the essence of things. I will admit, they don't always have a great plot, or more, there is a plot, but just because of the grim darkness of it all, it is not necessarily a satisfying plot. So in The Blade Itself, we meet these characters and they kind of are set up into their positions in this conflict. Then in the second book, which is the best book that I read in March, a group of them kind of go on a bit of a quest. One of them is left to defend the city in a quite undefendable state. And I can't remember who else was doing stuff. Anyway, it is definitely hard for me to keep this series separate in my head because I kind of view it as one whole. But you can tell that I love this trilogy because both the first two books ended up being the best books in the months that I read them. So everything I said about The Blade Itself is true of Before They Are Hanged. So if we're battling these three against each other, firstly it's hard because Magic Tides was such a short book. But the particular mythology it incorporated, which I can't really talk about because it is spoilers and part of the plot is just Kate figuring out what mythology is relevant, but I did really like that. But also it's just like a short little novella, so can you really compare it to these more full stories? Probably not, so we'll probably take Kate Daniels away first. Then we're going to have the first and second books of the First Law trilogy, and It's been a year. Can I remember which one I liked more? You know, I think in that second book they went on that quest, and then the quest was a whole waste of time. And also there was some weird sex scenes which are fine, probably quite realistically, but not necessarily fun to read. Also, maybe there were more battle scenes in that second book. I might be making that up. Anyway, I think just because in the beginning it was such an amazing discovery to find this world, I think for that reason we're going to pick The Blade Itself as the winner of Q1. Also, I read The Blade Itself during a cyclone, and like that experience is kind of like stuck in my head. Okay, then we're going to move on to Q2, and actually I realized I made a mistake in April. So my rule for the book battles is usually that rereads can't win. However, I can see that in April I let Vita Nostra win. Vita Nostra was a reread though, and even though I love Vita Nostra, if I let it enter this competition, it will win. So let's hold it back, because I'm pretty sure it did pretty well for itself the previous year when I did first read it. So instead we're going to have the one that was second in April. So we're going to have Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie Blake, up against Assassin of Reality by Marina and Sergey Dyachenko, up against Magic Clams by Ilona Andrews. So, Alone with You in the Ether is kind of a romance story by Olivie Blake, who wrote the Atlas 6 series, which wasn't my favourite, but I like her as a person, and I do like a lot of things about her writing style and how she explores themes. So I picked up Alone with You in the Ether, even though it's a romance, which isn't normally my thing. However, there is a lot more to the story. So we're following these two neurodivergent characters, both kind of struggling with their mental health issues, and they meet each other and kind of make an agreement that they're going to meet each other 6 times to have a conversation and just see where that takes them. But there's also a lot. So the guy in this relationship is trying to explore time travel, multiverse stuff, and the girl is like an artist or wants to be an artist. And there's some weird stuff in there that's kind of almost like stage direction. So it's written in a fairly creative way, and it brings in a lot of interesting concepts that I am particularly interested in. There's definitely parts where you could say the relationship is quite toxic, but I think that's kind of the point. Also, there is an afterword by Olivie Blake who talks about a lot of this being inspired by her own mental health issues, but also admitting that like the solution for different people would be different and the experience for different people would be different, which I think was a good message to add to the end of that book. But yeah, romance isn't normally my thing, but I would say this isn't really your typical kind of romance either. It's more about like this journey that these characters are going through, and it just happens that they are there for each other as that happens. Then in May, the best book of the month was Assassin of Reality. So this is actually the sequel to Vita Nostra that I mentioned earlier. So in Vita Nostra, we're following this young girl who's gone away on holiday with her mother, and then she meets this man who starts giving her these strange tasks to do. And these tasks eventually lead her to going to this Institute of Special Technologies, where it's really not clear what they're learning. The lessons that they're given are very abstract and nonsensical, like weird, but in a way that I really love. Like there's instructions that don't make any sense, but you can feel like maybe they almost do, and the characters kind of go through a journey where they're learning to make sense of these lessons. And it's one of these stories where it just builds on these weird concepts until it's like completely bizarre, but because it's built it up, it makes sense to you. And there's lines from Vita Nostra that have just stuck with me so well. I will say, Assassin of Reality wasn't quite as good. It goes off and focuses on this romance relationship, which really motivates a lot of the main characters' decisions in the second book. And it's a little bit love at first sight, not my favorite. But there are still definitely some lines and some concepts from that book that have really stuck with me. And I think as well, just because in the first book, things are so bizarre and you really have no idea what's going on. But by the second book, things have started to make a lot more sense, even though we still have like weird time loops and people as concepts. It's bizarre, but honestly, I really loved it. And then lastly, we have Magic Clams. So this is the second of those little Kate Daniels novellas, so the follow-on from Magic Tides. I don't know if we're going to get another one. I kind of hope so, but I'm not sure because it sounds like Ilona Andrews is off writing other things now. Anyway, in this one, basically this neighbouring town comes to ask Kate and her love interest for help with a magical issue they're dealing with. And again, this is one where I feel like if I could tell you what mythological element it deals with, it would be something that a lot of people would be interested in. It's something that has been quite popular for a while, and I loved the way that they addressed it in such a unique way. But again, most of the plot is Kate trying to work out what the deal is with this magical problem. And so telling you what it is a spoiler. But also, like, if you like the Kate Daniels books, you'll definitely be picking this up. You'll have already picked it up probably. If you don't like them, or you haven't read them before, this is not the place to start. But anyway, if I am putting these three up against each other, I guess first we'll have to take away Alone with You in the Ether, just because even though I did have a good time with it, I'll probably forget it over time. It's not the kind of book that I really like. So then we've got Assassin of Reality versus Magic Claims. They're very different, but I actually think both of them are like quite thought-provoking. Assassin of Reality more in a kind of an existential kind of way, although Alone with You in the Ether was a little bit like that too. But anyway, Assassin of Reality more in an existential way, Magic Claims more in like a problem-solving kind of way, which I think actually is a lot of why I like the Kate Daniels books, because it's so much of it is just her problem-solving and trying to solve these magical mysteries, and I just like problem-solving with people. So I actually think in this case I'm going to go with Magic Claims, because it would just be a crime if I didn't have a Kate Daniels book in line for the top spot. Okay, then Q3, we're going to have Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson up against The Promised Neverland Volume 1, up against The Highest House by Mike Carey. Okay, so Yumi and the Nightmare Painter was the third Brandon Sanderson secret project book. You can see I've got mine here, but I'm actually going to put up the picture instead of the non-special edition cover, because I think for the secret projects, this is the only cover that is possibly better than the special edition covers. So, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is about these two young people. One of them is a painter in this world where nightmares come to life, and they use painting in order to fight these nightmares. And then this painter, that's confusing, his name is Painter, he's a painter, and he forms this special link with this woman in another world who is kind of like a special religious figure in her world. Basically, she travels from place to place, her whole life is very controlled, and through the stacking of rocks, she's able to draw in these spirits who can then do magical tasks for the people of this world. Brandon Sanderson always has very strange magic systems, and I think maybe rock stacking is one of the strangest ones he's come up with. But these two characters form a magical bond, and they come together basically to help sort out each other's problems. In typical Brandon Sanderson style, there are some twists and turns, but really it's just like a lovely story about these two characters. And I really loved it. The one thing I didn't like about this is also the case with Tress. The first secret project book is Hoyd. Hoyd is a character throughout Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere universe, and he's very humorous, but not in a way that I enjoy. And I felt like the story would have been much better without him, because so often he's coming in and explaining things to you that I think would have been much better if they'd been shown to you through the plot. I'm just thinking now that almost every book I've been talking about on this list, I haven't said any criticisms for it, but Yumi and the Nightmare does have that one. Maybe the others also have ones that I've forgotten, but Hoyd is not something I can forget, unfortunately. Then in August I picked up the first volume of The Promised Neverland. So this is a 20-book manga series. I have been trying, or I especially was trying in 2023, to get to series 0, where I caught up on all the series that I had started, and I wasn't going to start any more series. So was starting a 20-book series a dumb move? Yes it was, but that's what I did, and I'm not mad about it. So basically in The Promised Neverland we meet this group of orphans in this orphanage, but there's some things about this orphanage that are a little bit off. And when these orphans, or these three oldest, particularly intelligent orphans, figure out what's going on, they make a plan to try and escape. And for most of it, it's very much like battle of wits between the mother figure in this orphanage and these kids trying to work out plans about what's going to happen. It's very similar in feel to Death Note in that way. And this is another one where actually I think the element that made me the most interested in this series is spoilers. So the reason about what's off with the orphanage really interests me. And I'm now only up to book 6. in that series, but 2024 will be making a lot more progress. Then in September we have another graphic type thing. So I think August was around where I started getting into reading a lot more graphic novels this year. So in September I read The Highest House, and this is probably the most full story fantasy graphic novel that I've read ever. So we're following this young boy who is being sold into slavery. He goes to work in this lord's manor, and there's this magical being that he meets and makes a deal with. I think what I love about this is like you're just kind of following along with the slave's journey. There's a lot of politics and world building that's being done in the background as the lord and his staff have conversations. And I think actually in the end this really frustrates me because it ends with end of part 1, but there has never been a part 2 released, and as far as I can tell there's no actual plans to follow through on it. And given that so much world building was developed and there's so much more potential for more story, so annoying. But the story that we do get is very satisfying. Really just a story about the slave trying to win his freedom or trying to be a good person in a difficult situation. And I really liked it. So if we're putting these 3 books up against each other, I think first we'll take away The Promised Neverland. Even though I really liked it, I do get frustrated with manga volumes that each little part of the story is such a small part and I always just want more. So we'll take that one away because the other 2 just had so much more to the story. Then if it comes down to Yumi and The Highest House, I think I just loved Yumi a lot more, even though The Highest House has some really interesting things going on. And I do really like the characters. Like there's so much more going on in the world building and in the character development and just in the relationships in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. So we're going to pick Yumi and the Nightmare Painter as the best book of the quarter. And then we're up to Q4. So we have Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, up against Tombs by Junji Ito, up against The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. So Joe Abercrombie dominating this quarter again. Nice book ending of the year. So Best Served Cold and The Heroes. Let's talk about October and December at the same time. Best Served Cold and The Heroes are both standalone novels in that same First Law world, continuing on after the main trilogy. We don't get any of the characters from the original trilogy as main characters in these books, but they are often peripheral, or like there's rumors about them, you see them there, they're important figures in the world, but we're following other people. And I feel like so much Joe Abercrombie is building up this tapestry of the world and like so many different character threads that then, because you know so many of the background characters' full stories, every scene has so much more context to it other than just the main character that you are following in that scene. So in Best Served Cold, we're following this woman. There is an assassination attempt made on her and she decides to get revenge on the 7 men that were involved. So basically, one after one, we're going after these men and trying to kill them. She also kind of brings together this group of people to help her with these murders, which almost sounds like it could be a found family situation. Like, actually in the first trilogy, the characters come together and they do tend to like each other more, or like start to build relationships. But in Best Served Cold, maybe there are some relationships that form, but they are not healthy relationships. Everything goes really badly in the end. But it also does set up some of our characters to be in really interesting positions, which is why I'm really looking forward to the later trilogy that's set in the First Law world. So then The Heroes, the December best book. This one, I was really worried about picking it up because it basically follows this 3-day battle between the Northmen and the Union. And we're following just all these characters on different sides as they attempt to play their part in the battle, but also usually they're also trying to further themselves and their own position. So I was worried because I don't particularly like battle scenes, and there were a lot of battle scenes in this. I will say I think Joe Abercrombie is pretty good at writing battle scenes. They still bored me, but like not as much as they could have. And then eventually the different character threads all come together in a way that I felt was quite satisfying. I also think in this one especially, but often previously as well, Joe Abercrombie does this thing where he sets up what could be the typical hero's journey. You know this is grimdark, that's not what's going to happen. So you think, oh, maybe he'll do this instead. And then he does something completely different. And I really, I enjoy that experience so much, like trying to guess and then just getting it wrong. So I really liked both of those. Then the other book that we have in this battle is Tombs by Junji Ito. Junji Ito is a horror manga creator, and Tombs is like a short story anthology. So many of these stories had like that horrible, cringy feel of like body horror or just like horrific things happening, and he always does such a good job of like starting out with a concept that's kind of yuck and then just building on it and building on it until it's like awful, but I love it. It's just so twisted. It's a great time. And I do think Tombs was actually the best short story anthology by Junji Ito that I've read. Maybe not better than Uzumaki, which is like more of a full story, but of the short story anthologies I've read by him, I think this was the best one. So if we're putting these three books up against each other, firstly, we're going to take away the heroes, because I was really surprised when that turned out to be the best book in December, and I suspect it's just because I didn't have a great reading month in December, and I really didn't like the battle scenes that much. So we're going to take the heroes away, and we've got Best Served Cold versus Tombs. You know, since we've already got something from the First Law World in the next round, let's take away Best Served Cold, and let's put Tombs by Junji Ito as the best book of Q4. Alright, now let's do, I guess, what's a semi-final battle for the first half and the second half of the year. So for H1, wow, that really takes me back to awful days of being in the corporate world. Anyway, for H1, we're going to have The Bladed South by Joe Abercrombie up against Magic Claims by Ilona Andrews. This is kind of similar to the battle when I had The Bladed South versus Magic Tides. Like, even though I really love the Ilona Andrews books and I think they're just so clever in what they do, and I just like the characters so much, I do also really love the characters in The Blade itself, and I love meeting them. I love the way the magic was dealt with. It's very different. Like, Magic Claims, the magic is so concrete and well thought through and so logical, whereas in The Blade itself, magic is so magical and abstract. So they're very different approaches to magic, but I think I appreciate both approaches in the right context. But there's just so much more to the story of The Blade itself, and it's just started me on such a great journey going through that series. So I think we're going to pick The Blade itself for H1. Then for H2, we're going to have Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson up against Tombs by Junji Ito. This is another one where it's just not fair to compare like a short story anthology of graphic stories, which, like, even though they were great and cringe, they don't have that much substance to them. Whereas Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is like an amazing world, amazing characters, amazing plot. So we're going to pick Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. So here we are. Now we are going to pick the best book that I read in 2023. So we're going to have The Blade itself by Joe Abercrombie up against Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. So it's probably quite telling that the H1 battle was a much harder battle than this battle is going to be. I think my reading at the start of the year was much better than my reading at the second half of the year, and I really want to try and get that H1 feeling back into 2024. But anyway, you know, maybe this would be a harder battle if it wasn't for Hoid. But Hoid still exists, so I think for that reason, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter wasn't quite everything that I could have wanted it to be. And I do tend to like things to be a little bit darker, which is definitely the description for The Blade itself. So I think we're going to pick The Blade itself as the best book of the year. I don't know if that's what I expected or not, but I definitely would like to show my appreciation for Becca in the books. I only picked up The Blade itself because she's reading the First Law World books as part of her catch-up book club. Otherwise, I might not have picked this up, and it's a series that I have ended up really loving. So let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, because I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Or let me know, what do you think was the best book that you read in the year of 2023? And of course, subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.